Happy Thursday, everybody. It's your girl, Jeanette Smith, certified life strategist and mindset coach. And it is time for another episode of Life Unscripted, where we may talk about anything and everything. And I see you, brother. The anticipation is building. That's how I feel too. I'm so glad to have you all on. We've been talking about many things on this Thursday afternoon program. It kind of took a turn. We were doing lifestyle topics for a while, and then we kind of took a turn as the nation took a turn. First, we were dealing with the worldwide pandemic. So we were talking about that. Then we took a turn again as the nation and then the world began another discussion about racial equality. So we have followed suit and trying to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening and having straight talk about it. You all who have been following may remember that we got a panel together of about 10 people. We all went on the Harvard website and took the implicit biases surveys. We discussed our findings for the first time together online. And out of that came some great discussions. And so then we moved into getting the therapists on from a cross-section of, hello, pastor, hello, brother, of cross-section of, hold on, y'all's favorite niece is trying to get up. Okay, say hello. All right, now back to your place. A cross-section of therapists of all races and backgrounds to talk about how do we talk so people will listen, and how do we listen so people will actually talk. And we moved from there into kind of just doing the work through the coaching. And so now I'm excited because I just wanted to kind of check in and go across topics with two people who are extremely interesting to me. One who I've known for a while, another sister who is new to me, and I know that you are going to enjoy them as much as I'm excited about having them on. So let me first introduce our guest for today. We began with Dr. Darrell Ezell. He is a social scientist, an author, a visionary leader with expertise in foreign affairs, business strategy, organizational development, and innovation in higher education. He's the principal of Heritage Solutions, LLC, which is a strategy consulting firm. He is heavy, okay? He is heavy. Both of them are heavy. You have to check out their whole curriculum vitae if you want to go see everything. All right. He is an immediate past president for academic affairs and dean at Claremont Lincoln University. He holds a PhD from the University of Birmingham in the UK, postdoctoral training in higher education administration, Northeastern University, and leadership principles from Harvard Business School. He serves his community as a College Board of Trustee. He works as an advancement chair with the Boy Scouts of America. He is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, as you see, fraternity incorporated there in his sweater, and he enjoys hiking in U.S. national parks and urban gardening. That just took a little turn. It kind of sounded a little bit like we were on the dating game for a second. But they're laughing. I can see them in the room. They're laughing because I'm going to read the heavy resume, but then I'm going to show you them in real life. Okay. So our next guest, Reverend Michelle Letter, who is the Director of Equality and Anti-Racism for the General Commission on Religion and Race. G-Corps focuses on helping the United Methodist Church at all levels live to an increasingly honorable forms of diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, and racial equality. Reverend Letter is an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She serves as an assistant minister at Metropolitan AME, the historic Metropolitan AME in Washington, D.C., where Reverend William Lamar is the pastor there. She is a PhD candidate at Emory University with her focus on homiletics and pedagogy, preaching and teaching. Her dissertation, stand back, get ready for the mic drop. Her title is Preaching Truth and Anti-Racist Homiletic for 21st Century White Christians That Interrupts and Dismantles Racism. Bam. All right. She lives in Baltimore City with her rescued Snoodle Webster, and she understands the joys of fur baby motherhood. Would you please join me? Get your emojis together, everybody. Get your radical hospitality out and welcome Dr. Darrell Ezell and Reverend Michelle Letter to the broadcast. Hello, beautiful beautiful people. So glad to have you both with.
Greetings, y'all. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Yes. Patrick Claiborne said, Joya has pressed the care button. She says she cares about this so much. That is Joya, for context, it happens to be Dr. Ezell and my goddaughter. And so she says, I love you, Dad. I'm sure she's saying, I love you, Darrell, too. Thank you. Love you, too. We love you, too. Dr. Jennifer is on from the West Coast representing. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you. Yes, boom, right? These are heavy folks. Lanisha, good to see you. Thanks for the hearts. We are doing what I call today Table Talk Straight No Chaser. And I felt like you two were the best folks to do this with. I want to give context for folks about your perspectives as you'll be sharing them today, coming from your unique journeys. I mean, we got this brother, Anoop, Kappa Alpha Psi, with a PhD from a university in the UK, thriving as an urban gardener. And then we have my very fair-skinned sister preaching truth to the 21st century white Christians to interrupt and dismantle racism. So I want everybody to kind of understand your journey to this place. And I know that that's kind of hard to do because you all have had a very extensive and blessed journey. But just as we talk about these items of racial equality, of oneness, where does oneness stand in as we look at what's happening in the world today, and also just trying to figure out how do we continue to thrive in disruption. Give us a short kind of understanding about where your perspective will be coming from. And Reverend Michelle, let's start with you.
Well, thank you so much. My perspective in different areas of my life varies in outcome or expression. So I hope that in all aspects of my life, including my personal life, I'm living increasingly honorable into anti-racism, into disrupting and dismantling racism, while always recognizing that there's no place that I can ever be explicitly or implicitly, symbolically or literally, in which I stand outside of the system of racism and no longer are protected or privileged by it. So when I enact anti-racism strategies or work within my ordination, within ministry in the AME Church, it looks different than when I do so as part of G-Corps, because the United Methodist Church, at least in the United States, is at least 90% white. So in those cases, I'm very explicitly a white person speaking to mostly other white folks about what it means for us to do anti-racism work. Right. So, and then, in my personal life, I'm coming from the perspective that no matter what I do externally, I always have to continually do internal work because racism lives within me, and I perpetrate racism as being a white person within this system. So my perspective hopefully is always anti-racist, and I seek always to live into and out of that. But the outcome, the expression of that is different depending on where I am positionally.
Wow, you just dropped a bomb. I perpetrate racism by being a white person in the system. By being a white person. If some people could just grasp the insight that you wrapped up in that little golden nugget, that would lead to some deeper excavation, I believe. Darrell, thank you so much for that, Reverend Michelle. Darrell, sir, we're passing the mic.
Thank you so much, Jeanette, for the invitation to be on the show today. And it's great to be here with you as well, Reverend Letter as well. For me, I approach the conversation, and I want the guests to understand where I'm coming from. I'm coming from an intercultural engagement standpoint, right? And I say that because, I am a Black male. I'm a native of Alabama. In that space where you have to not only challenge racist systems, but also you have to challenge calcitrant Black systems as well, historically, right?
Mhm.
In addition to that, I am a social scientist. I am a theologian. I believe that it is possible to put one's faith into action in an effort to resolve conflict, to make societies and systems aware of the struggle and oppressions that people are going through on a day-to-day. As someone who deeply cares about interfaith relations,
Mhm.
I operate in that space as well. So for me, I am a strategist. I have participated at the grassroots level in activism, community activism, whether we're talking about workers' rights, advocating on behalf of immigrants, in society who are documented and undocumented. As a Black male who understands, that I need to stand in that space with people in a space of solidarity, also with, Black folks, with white folks, with the poor, with persons who are considered to be on the other side of the ocean in the aisle, riding on U.S. Islamic relations. And for me, I found that I could be most useful at the diplomatic table, mediating, carrying out the conversation, making sure that voices are represented that are historically pushed away from the table. So for me, I would want the guests to understand that here is a young man who is a strategist, who's a social scientist, who, he takes religion seriously, but he challenges religion.
Yeah.
Because I believe that faith in action is indeed true work for society.
I'm looking at this grouping of the three of us. We are all tied in some way to the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And I would say we are all change agents in our own right, which is kind of just feeding me in this moment. Let's get to our discussions for today. I wanted to start out, I told you all that we were going to talk about navigating the race debate from all angles, our personal experience, frustrations, vocations. I want to flip a paradigm, if you'll allow me, in this questioning. Where are Black people or people of color getting it wrong in this fight for equality, and where are white people getting it right? Where are Black people or people of color getting it wrong in our current, I know that this can vary because what we see happening in the UK may be different than what we are seeing happening here. Let's focus on in the US right now, and then we can expand if we need to. But I flipped that for a reason, because many of the conversations that I get in are white people telling Black people where they're missing it, and Black people telling white people where they're missing it. So I want to flip it for a second. Who wants to? Let's start with, where are white people getting it right in this fight? This go round. Many people have said, well, let me ask you all, do you both feel like this is different this time around? The movement as you see it, does this feel different to you than when we've seen other cases rise up?
I think for me, it's in color, right? I was talking to someone, excuse me, I actually just got finished working out, so I'm perspiring.
Just bragging, but go ahead.
No. It's just like, but I was talking to someone earlier, and I said, hey, listen, you got to understand something, that when we think about the civil rights movement, when we think about Jim Crow within a historical context, unfortunately, we see it in black and white. And it's so far away from us. It's worlds apart. Like, yeah, the civil rights movement took place. It's in black and white. But when you look at pictures, right, that have been tinted and there's a little color in there, you humanize the pictures. You can notice that Dr. King has gold cufflinks on, that Mahalia Jackson is standing, somewhat down to the right. You also notice that another person is here. You begin to embody the space. And I think what's happened here is that a lot of folks are saying to say, oh, are we in a race war in America? Is a race war going on? Well, historically, it's been taking place for a long time. I think that we're just seeing small battles that are popping up, small Tulsas in a sense that are popping up. And what we're in right now is that type of tinderbox, right? The tinderbox where if you go left or if you go right, something's going to take place. I believe that a lot of our white brothers and sisters are getting it right from the standpoint by exercising technology, social media, and saying that we will stand in solidarity with. And we see that with regards to marches. We see that with regards to expressions, public outcries and expressions that Black folks are dying in the street, that they are suffering. We also see the multiplier effect of the Viola Liuzos, of the nation, white women and white men that are actually willing to put their bodies on the line to stand in solidarity. And, for a lot of African Americans, especially in the Deep South, they're saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this is taking place. But it's always taking place. We just didn't really see it and really hear about it. But at this level in 2021, I'm going to stop saying 2020, but in 2021, right? It's more pronounced today. And the hope is that it will maintain, it will continue, and also that it will be transparent and we can get something done.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Dr. Ezell. Reverend Michelle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's different is that the publicized aspects of protest and resistance, and even speaking about the protests and resistance, is much more widespread. So there's much more going on and being shared more widely via social media and via even media coverage. And I think, part of it, I don't think we can negate how sheltering in place and disruptions in kind of how people have been spending time over these last couple of months have affected it. I think there's so many ways that we can talk about it, but I think at the very least, just kind of mentioning that, our daily structure is different right now because of COVID-19. And so that also affects, how people are gathering or not gathering, protesting or not protesting. I think one of the places where those of us who are white get it right or live into anti-racism is when we recognize, accept, and live into our deep responsibility for dismantling the system of racism, while honoring that the strategies for doing so are for people of color and especially in these times, Black folks. So when we recognize the level of work and the mantle of work that we need to do, that is long overdue for us, while not shifting that into our own understanding of now we are supposed to be developing strategies for this as well.
Yeah. So let's take the back end of that question then. Where are Black people, specifically people of color, in general, not getting it right necessarily in this iteration of the movement?
I think one of the challenges is that when we say that a group of people are not getting it right, I think we need to unpack that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to unpack that.
It's never absolute, nenever all or none. But
yeah, because
I'm sorry, the PhDs in the room.
No. No. I think that it's important that we unpack it from the standpoint of asking the question. Okay, what is right? How does that look?
Let me define the term since I set the question up for you all.
Yeah.
Obviously, we either want to move this forward, right, with lasting results, and we want to not only do what's right, but we want to do it right. Okay, so would that stand to hold?
I mean, absolutely, and I think that when we start talking about that, we have to talk about organization, right? So if we go back to this historical context of movements like the civil rights movement per se, we knew for a fact that there was a united front that was in place. Right now, there is no united front whatsoever. We have a Black Lives Matter movement that's in place and a handful of other movements that, people are trying to figure out, where are they located? Are there chapters that exist? How can I download anti-racism toolbox for my organization? There's a lot of scrambling that's taking place. And I think that this is a good place that we're in right now, because where there's disruption, there's room and time enough for innovation, right? Innovation on the faith-based front, innovation on the corporate front, innovation on the front of folks in their everyday lives and families trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to exist in society? So one of the things that I would like to see, especially coming from my Black and brown brothers and sisters, is a deep focus on economic development, widespread, broad economic development. And some people say, okay, where do I start? Should I start my own LLC? I mean, where do I go to the public library and pick up a book on, starting my own business? But I think that we're realizing that economics, in a sense, is the key. It will not eradicate racism in society at all, but it will create a pathway for survival, and I don't even like using the term subsistence, but survival and the ability to grow in times like these. So I think that's one of the things that I would like to see from a lot of my Black and brown brothers. I will not go to the negative as it relates to the riots that we've seen over the last couple of months, because there's been a mixture of folks, wrapped up in that. There have been Black folks, white folks, folks from
people that are not even tied to the cause, just
not even tied to the cause, but are tied to an opportunity, right? And looking at the positive outlook of it, I think that the economic side is the biggest key of it all, for me and in my space.
Reverend Letter?
And
y'all just jump in, because this is starting to feel so formal and doctor. I would use your titles, but and just in terms of just jump in and talk. We talking.
Just call me Ezell.
Well, so especially based on that invitation to informality, I'll just say, straight up, like, as a white person, I feel super uncomfortable.
I'm sure.
So right now, literally right now, what I'm trying to balance is that I just received instruction from a Black woman to do something. My immediate instinct is to rely on guidance that I've received, through anti-racism and through, other Black folks about, like, that's not your
what you criticize. So let me be the path leader. Let me step up as Darrell helped me a moment ago. Let me step up and help you further and cover you. The reason I asked this question is because, from a positive psychology standpoint, and from my standpoint as a mindset coach, when we have these discussions, we can't have them one-sided. We can't only talk about how you get it right and maximize that and minimize what's not working on either side. And I have experienced a lot of that. Well, I'll raise this and then maybe a challenge, but that's not, we don't want to talk about that. We want to look at that with a long range lens, right? And we want to lift this up with a magnifying glass. And the truth is, those things matter. They all matter. So it's not about criticizing for the sake of criticizing. It's about saying, will we honestly step to the table and own all of it? Because for me, I just believe that until we can own all of it, I can't ask you to own all of it, but then I'm not going to own all of it. Right. And so from that perspective, that's why I'm trying to get everybody's influence. Now, again, Darrell has helped us. We've already said this isn't everybody. All Black people don't this and all white people ain't that. Right. But from your perspective, if you're talking to, because you do have that unique influence through your work of speaking to both a historically Black church and preaching and imparting to them, and having a captive white audience as you work with the United Methodist Church. So from your perspective, Shield.
Well, I think too that
where could we work? What could we work on as people of color from your perspective? Doesn't make it right? It's your perspective.
Sure. I especially so when I place myself within, let's say, metropolitan, if I were preaching or like teaching church school or something like that, my focus would be on systemic. Like how that would be the lens that I would be trying to use always, right? So how does whatever we do link directly back into the systemic? So whether that's economic development or whether that's, I mean, even within Black churches, it's not that we can look at all, even just AME churches, right? We can't look at all AME churches and just expect or assume or even know that all of that money is in Black-owned banks, let's say, right? So even to that extent, so when Black churches have their money in an institution that has already proven itself to have racist policies and racist, there's disjunct between trying to work toward racial justice in whatever form that takes and how the economics are playing out. So I think from my perspective as a ordained person in the AME church, I'm constantly trying to think of how God empowers us, has created and called us to have the power to change systems that seem intractable. That every single individual or interpersonal expression of racism can be traced back to some system, policy, practice, or procedure that's protecting it, right? And that if we attack the systems, then we are also going to be attending to those things. Now, that's not to say that we don't also attend to individual and interpersonal expressions of racism, because if you do one and not the other, then basically your policies seem either superficial, hypocritical, or just for show or something like that. So I think that if we're tapping into the power of the Holy Spirit, the power of God through the universe and people and all of that, then how do we dismantle these systems in such a way that we don't recreate oppression in another way, or don't replicate, what Audre Lorde would say is the master's house, right? How do we do that in such a way that we're dismantling it so that it falls and that a new creation, a new anti-oppressive system, in this case, anti-racist system would be in its place, that then all of us can live in wholeness, that there is no oppressor and a direct target of oppression. There is, using the biblical story of like when the lion and the lamb come together, right? It's like, oh, in the kingdom of God, the lion and lamb are going to hang out. Well, that's crazy because, how is that going to be possible, right? But equity, and in this case, like racial equity would say, yeah, but like, so God provides the possibility that the lion and the lamb can come hang out together. But equity says, and justice work says, then the lion and the lamb are going to come together and be like, hey, how did this power differential happen in the first place? And how do we create something so that this is actually an equitable system? This is a system of justice. This isn't just because God happens to be holding it right now. This is something we can build and create and compound upon it.
My white sister, you did it. You did it. You did the tweetables. That was the mic drop. She was like, what? You were a little nervous, but you did it. You did it. You did it. Let's take it light for a second. I tell you, and I thank both of you for your insight. Neil in the chat room says economics is the one thing that bonds and has a different voice all of its own.
Sir.
And yes, ma'am. So they're feeling both of what you're laying down there. I ran across a photo that has
Oh,
an
Lord.
interesting. It's out of you. Why do it?
No, I don't know. This, I mean, the mic dropped, and I don't know what's gonna come next. I'm like, it's gonna be a baby picture, you know, with I don't know, you know, me in the afro or Michelle. I don't know, you know.
No, but now that you said that, I so wish I had it. I wish that I had that.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Yes, Neville, she did handle that. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. Okay. All right. It's not of either of you. Does that make it better? Y'all are so funny. But it comes with a funny story. So some of you that follow me, Empowerment Tribe, you all have heard me talk about this when we've done a couple. I brought it up one other time when we were talking about implicit biases. But this is me and my friend Billy. Now, Billy and I, as my mother tells me, were the only kids on the block. So I don't know if we just ended up being friends because we were the only kids on that street and we were too young to be traversing to other streets or what. But clearly I have an affinity for Billy. That's my buddy, arm around him, and it's my buddy Billy. So one day I came home and I was crying because Billy had hit me. And I looked at my parents and, you know, I didn't understand. First of all, why is my friend hitting me? Billy. Why is my friend hitting me? First of all. And then, like, what do you do about that? Like, this was a whole new thing. I don't know if you all can think back to that first time when you have to come face to face with some sort of meanness or violence or something like that. But I was like, this is my friend, and he hit me. And my father explained to me, a good Air Force officer said, baby girl, sometimes people won't be able to control their emotions and they might do something like that. I hate to have to tell you that. Don't you ever hit and start anything like that. However, if somebody hits you, don't send me no emails, y'all. I don't want to hear it. I won't even open them up. I'm just telling you right now. I won't even open your little emails up. He said, ball up your fist and hit him back. And that will end that. And as the story goes, as the legend of Jeanette and Billy goes, Jeanette balled up her fist and walked out of the house and found Billy and just hit him. She didn't wait for the next time.
Right.
She just, in her mind, deduced 1 for 1. Tit for tat. This is the back, right? And my mother, who, after I shared that photo a few weeks ago, said, well, you know, on the back end of that, you all came out the best of friends. You all went back to playing like nothing ever happened. So we're not even sure if that picture was before the incident or after the incident. And I thought, wow, if only things could work like that. You punch me, I punch you. We're cool. We get over it. Let's move on. Let's to the next. But we know it doesn't work like that. And we know that the hitting has gone on for a long time in one direction. A question that I would like you all to finish is, we could make more meaningful strides in this fight against racial injustice, if only. I know that makes it really balls it down. But just come not only from the intelligentsia that you all possess so heavily, but also from your spirit that you all are so anointed and carry. If only.
Well, right. No, well, I think if only life wasn't about competition, right? You know, it's unfortunately, this is very, very unfortunate that we live in a world where somehow or another on some day, I don't know who designed this thing, said that one group will compete against another group because that group has objects, that group has things, they have resources. And as a result, we will put these folks at odds and in competition with one another. If we were in a place where we could just talk it out, And that happens in some places around the world.
Right. Imagine that.
Yeah, not all. In some places, in some indigenous systems, that takes place. Groups come together, they talk it out. Next thing you know, we back friends. But it's about resources, unfortunately. And when we look at like the narrative and the history of the United States, right? It's a political economy. A group of people, came to a place that was already discovered and said that they discovered it, and then went and crossed the water and brought another group of people over here to build up this economy. And in order for, the society, and this is again the social science hat, in order for the society to produce and to offer up, somebody has to be down and somebody has to be up. And, when I think about this, I think about Walter Rodney in the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? And then you look at the equator and you raise questions about why is it that the global north, today it has resources while the global south is lacking resources. It's, it just didn't happen overnight. It's by design in a sense. So we live in a world where there is, hella competition. Excuse me, reverends, but it's hella competition,
That's just real talk.
Straight talk, no chaser. Hella competition, but it's hella competition, with regards to survival. And the fact that if one group is able to outwit and outcompete another group, or in this case, a race, then that's a problem. I mean, we look at, the United States historically, man, we've been going at this race thing for, in my opinion, just too long. And, I'm tired, of, having the race conversation. I mean, you make a lot of money off the race conversation if you just want to do this thing. Right. But, it's not good for your blood pressure. No. It's not good for your, diabetes or whatever the case might be, underlying health conditions. So at some point, I want to be able to, live in a world where, I don't feel as if, there's a target on my back, as an African-American male, right? And society is in a sense, is doing a great job at indicating that there is a target on the backs of young African-American males or Black folks in particular. And then we're reversing, the fabric in saying that all people of color dislike, white folks in America. And that's not necessarily true. So we're just caught up in this huge, just staticky conversation. And we can't find some form of a pathway forward. And we pick and choose, I believe, our sanitized quotes. We love King. I mean, we love using King. This about this and so on and so forth. But the reality that in 1964, King was not even allowed to preach in a number of historic Black churches, because the message was considered to be a bit too radical. And we forget about 1963 in the letter from a Birmingham jail. And not only white ministers were asking King to not come to Birmingham, not enter the city, but a large number of African-American ministers as well, because they didn't want anything to do with the movement per se. And then after the movement ended and, King passed and we moved on, stories start to change. Right. You were in the room with him and you marched across the bridge and you gave him some advice and what have you. Right. There is tremendous sacrifice in this thing called racial conversations, racial harmony, anti-racism, because of the notion, in my opinion, around competition. One group has resources, another group doesn't have resources. In order that group survives, we have to keep that particular group down. So that's the unfortunate piece around all this.
Dr. Darrell, you walked heavy, sir. So many tweetables in there. So many tweetables in there. Before you answer, Reverend Michelle, I'm laughing because your old our teacher friend, I guess, educator Mary Rankin said that she might actually have a photo or two of Dr. D when he was little.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
if we need to inject that.
Mary, don't do it, please. Easter Sunday photo.
Yes. Well, your friend, Reverend Dr. Claymore, said no fair. He also adds this. Yeah, you're odd. Wilmore, the Black Church and the Black radicalism thesis. The Black Church lost its potency when it veered away from radicalism. So true. Thank you, sir. Yes to all of that. Reverend Michelle?
I think the thing I'd like to highlight is outcome over intent. And I think at this point, focusing on intent, especially for those of us who are white, it gets us into this round and round that doesn't get at what's actually happening. So in intent, many times will leave us in a space where we talk about what ifs, and it could have been, or it should have been, and all of those things. But those don't necessarily, perhaps even to a very small account, get us to a place that actually interrupts and dismantles racism. Yeah. So rather than focusing on intent first and then developing outcomes when intent and outcomes start to match up, or when another way that's put is like hearts and minds are transformed, then we do the thing. Flipping that into outcome first and then go back for intent, or then go back for hearts and minds. Because what I found in my work with G-Corps and my work with white dominant and all white churches is that when white pastors connect our charge to meet the people where they are and to love the people with the intent of those of us who are white, who are still perpetrating racism in multiple ways, one of which is to hold up the work until we feel comfortable enough. Those things match up. What happens in actuality is that pastors are waiting for the most stubborn heart and mind to come around and then do the work. So by flipping it, by moving to a lens of, does this actually interrupt? Does this actually dismantle racism? Doing that and then going back, even if we talk about it in a pastoral kind of sense, I don't think the pastoral and prophetic or even pastoral and political are separate. Yeah. But I do know that there's nuances sometimes to that. If we go back for hearts and minds after the work is already in progress, then we can help somebody understand why this movement is the movement of God rather than waiting. Because I mean, the reality is people are dying while people of color are dying while white people are waiting for our hearts and minds to either figure it out, come along, or what have you. So if the structure of it is always outcome first, it doesn't negate intent, but it also doesn't allow intent to dictate the journey or the content or the speed at which it happens.
I like that point. If I could jump ahead, Michelle, with regards to, if I'm reading it correctly, radical intent, radical dismantling, and coming together and breaking it apart. And then we can figure out, everything else we need to figure out. Right. Let's radically break this thing down. And I think that is actually, in a sense, what is needed, because historically we felt this, we've been in this space so many times that, okay, if, we're looking at young Black boys walking in public or jogging in public, and there are a group of people who feel as if they don't belong in that neighborhood or in that public space, how do we radically dismantle those racist actions towards that group of folk? Or let's flip it and let's talk about Asian brothers and sisters, who may be going toward this, via Black people who may be acting racist. Because I had an experience when I was advocating on behalf of a workers' right union in Mississippi. African-American contractors were hiring, Latinos, and they were underpaying them or not paying them at all. right? So, as a black brother, I'm like, hold on for a second. Hey, brother, wait a second. Historically, do you know what you're doing?
Right.
And what is actually taking place, and having to educate these folks to say, hey, look, man, you're doing the same thing that historically, racist whites were doing to us, and still in many cases are doing. So it's that teaching piece, and also just radically just ripping it down. And you got me thinking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer right now. You got me in that Bonhoeffer space, right? When he said, throwing the wrench into the wheel and just halting it all in an effort to put one's faith on the line, to do what's right because it is right. Yeah. And I think that also, requires us to challenge the church, black churches in particular. You want to talk about it?
We don't want to talk about it straight, no chaser. Reverend Cherie Smith Claiborne says, Reverend Michelle Letter, yes, yes, yes. Reverend Dr. Patrick Claiborne, yes, yes. The pastoral and prophetic are not separate. Neil says this. Bishop Neil Smith says this conversation makes everyone uncomfortable. Yet a conversation, though hard it may be, needs to be had. Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that we won't settle anything here, but I hope that people have heard from your varying perspectives some very common themes that are also in what you're saying, that we have work to do. And really the work is in the bridge building. We can't wait on either side to feel comfortable to move. By the very nature of us being faith folks, faith without works are dead. So either you got to get on and do what you know to do that's right. And I always add, I know, Darrell, you use that adage of do what's right because it's right. But then I've always had to add and do it right. Because some people will do what's right because it's right and do it wrong. And you cause more problems because they hadn't done anything. Right. Just stay back, right? Reverend Dr. Claiborne says, Reverend Michelle, such a powerful point. Waiting on the most stubborn to come around is a tendency of most pastors. But let's look more closely. It's not just that they're the most stubborn. They may also be the biggest financial contributors. Here's where the pastor has to put more trust in God. Speak, sir. That's a straight no. Wait a minute. Just because you did that, sir, I feel like you deserve one too. Drop that one. That's some real talk right there. Bishop Neil Smith says, let's continue to be consistent with the conversation and messaging and not dummy down to make others feel comfortable. An uncomfortable message can cause movement. It's what we have to do. And I'm with you, Darrell. Okay, here's my straight talk, no chaser. I'm tired of talking about it too. You want to be honest? I'm tired. I'm emotionally tired too. And we had this whole discussion on my other show about how Black people and people of color are getting emotionally, like, we're just arrested. We're depleted, right? Because either you're trying to process it and then process it and explain it, process it, explain it, and help you get it. And, sometimes people we don't have it. We just don't have it. And so I get it. But every time I get ready to let this conversation go, it's like I can't. It's like something in me says, but we got to keep having it in a different way, right? Because we all know that people can hear things, 100 times this way, but it might be just this way that it really landed. It really stuck.
Jeanette, I don't want to soften it up a little bit, but it's kind of like, when you're in a relationship with someone and it's just not working, but you don't want to let it go. Yeah. And every time you sit down and say, hey, look, baby, I think that X, Y, Z, and then it goes another way. And after 5 minutes, y'all back at it again. And then you listen to the dramatics, Otis Redding.
Eye roll though. Did you see that was a telling eye roll. There was something in that eye roll, Reverend Michelle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I've grown older, I can be candid, about these things. But what has to happen and what's needed, I think, is a deep sense of therapy, right? But what does therapy look like?
Absolutely.
I'm just being serious with regards to this race thing, because, when digging into Marvin Gaye, the real deal Marvin Gaye, what's going on, right? That 1973, 1974 album, what that brother was talking about, we all really want to get on together And that was one of the reasons why I moved to Europe. You know, I was tired.
Mhm.
You know, at the age of, I think, 24, 25, I had just visited West Africa, 3 countries, Morocco, Senegal, and Gambia. And I actually saw people, you know, engaging and getting on and then moving over to England, Birmingham, England for 5 years and living and working and what have you. You're looking at multiracial relationships, multiracial communities,
Yeah.
an apartment building where my next door neighbor is from Pakistan, the person to the right of me is from India, the person above me is from Barcelona, the person across the hall from me, you know, is from Nigeria, and everybody in a sense is getting on with each other because we really don't have that much space. In the United States of America, it's huge, it's large. And oftentimes in metropoles, people are forced to get on with each other, right? But in these wide spaces like the South and, you know, the Midwest and what have you, you know, if you don't like something with someone, you can just go to, you know, 2 cities over or whatnot and still be okay. But we have to figure out how to get on with each other, because I actually believe that we have more stuff in common than not. And we are proven to that, you know what I'm saying, on this conversation right here, and also with regards to our life experiences. But I don't want to water it down and pretend as if we don't need to go through some form of therapy. And because, you know, 400 plus years of, you know, unjustified, you know, actions against Black people, in addition to Black folks, you know, women, you know, low levels of gender parity, equality, equity, you know, here in this country, something has to give. Now we're at a turning point. By 2045, we know for a fact that this is going to be a minority majority nation. What is that going to look like? It looks like this. Right now, we are at the starting point of that beautiful bell curve. And the troubles and the things that we're seeing and the conversations that we're having in this space, you know what I'm saying, right now. All right, Pat, in this space right now, is a conversation that's leading us to the top of a hill where, you know what, in 15 years, we will look like Brazil.
Yeah.
You know, we will, our families, in a sense, will look like Brazil. You come to the South, you find, you know, Black bodies sharing space with white bodies, you know, brown Asian bodies sharing space, you know, with yellow bodies. I mean, folks are just getting on, they're trying to at least get on with each other, especially with regards to interracial relationships. You know, they're trying to get on with each other, you know, but being pushed back with all of these pressures and these pains, you know, in the society about, well, you need to do it like this, you should do it like that. You do it how you want to do it.
Yeah. All right. All right. Oh, I feel it coming on. I feel it coming. Man, that's a whole nother show right there. I'm all about the EEOC when it comes to dating, but that's a whole nother show. So I know it's 1:54. I want to respect your time, but I do have 2 other things I would like to get your insights on. So I'm checking in. Dr. Ezell, do you have?
Oh, I got time.
Okay. Reverend Michelle. Okay.
Yeah.
What to be very, very. Everybody's shouting y'all down. Shouting y'all down. And yes, Reverend Dr. Claiborne, you got your own personal mic drop. Yes, you did. Let's switch gears for a moment. And thank you all, because I'm telling you, those of you are watching this on replay, bless yourself. Keep watching. Watch it from the beginning. And those of you who joined us midway, bless yourself. Go back and watch it from the beginning. Many, many wisdom nuggets flowing out of here today. Let's go back and talk about another a little aspect, and we'll end on oneness. Reverend Michelle, you kind of alluded to it a little bit in some things that you said earlier, but we'll come back to that. This minding our mindset, you talked about it, Darrell, in terms of our mental health. And, you know, we started out in a pandemic and everybody was trying to wrap their minds around that. We're still reeling from and trying to get used to we're not even in the post-pandemic phase yet, but we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. And I was listening to the Washington Post this morning, and they were talking about, here's something that we're not even keeping our eye on, but that is ratcheting up. And that is the number of suicides that are happening now due to drug death. And they said, in fact, if we weren't in the middle of what all's going on with, you know, protesting and what's going on in terms of the COVID situation, that we would be seeing these huge numbers spiking in, medicine overdoses, right? So I'm starting to think about what are the other things that we don't have our eyes on. I know there's some things that are happening, even across the waters that we're not necessarily locked in on that have impact on us. But, think about it. You just said the mental health thing is a big deal. When it comes to our Black communities and some of our brown communities, there's a stigma about even seeing therapists and getting medical, help in that sense. But then also, I don't know that we're thinking about what isolation is doing to people, what losing jobs is doing to people. And while they thought that maybe us being isolated and shutting the country down was going to somehow curtail, the flow of drug trafficking as much as it was, people always find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. So now they're getting these subpar, substances that mix with who knows what. And then you're isolated. So even if you have a situation or problem, there's nobody to call for help. Nobody's even in touch to know, you know what I'm saying, kind of what's going on with people. So that was another thing that raised a flag for me about, man, we've got to, I'll say it like this. I was watching a TED talk where the guy was juggling, and he was saying, for me to juggle and talk, I can't be so focused on what I'm saying that I'm missing what's happening in front of my face. And I can't be so focused on what's happening in front of my face that I can't get my inner dialogue together. And I feel like that's where we kind of need to be as a country. We can't be so focused on one or the other that we're missing things. Anyone want to jump in on that? What are the things? Well, let me ask you this, Darrell, because that's your level, that's your expertise in terms of what's happening abroad. What are the things that that we're not paying attention to that are going to have major impact in what's happening here in the U.S.?
Yeah. So one of the things I think is geopolitics and looking particularly at the geopolitical landscape and how it's shifting tremendously. One, with regards to trust in the United States of America. Keep in mind that after the presidency of President Barack Obama, there was a big conversation at the G8 table where folks were actually saying, you know what, are we at a turning point where the United States is no longer or will no longer be considered to be, the leader of the free world
Right.
because of its scope and interpretation around democracy, democratization, freedom of speech, the First Amendment and what have you. Is it moving into a space of isolationism? And that's what we actually see with regards to currently U.S. foreign policy under the current administration. That's the first thing. The second piece, which is so important, is the concept around mental health and what does that mean? And if we are all existing in a country right now where it's okay to one day have enough information about the COVID virus, and then the next day not enough information, and then the next day it shifts and changes and what have you, we have to raise questions about what does that do to one's mental well-being, but most importantly to the most vulnerable in our society, and as it relates to the elderly community. One of the third things I think that is so important is the challenge to faith institutions. We can talk all day long about the role of the church and what the church should do. I have to say that, I've seen some innovation in some churches. Some churches, at a snap, boom, they were online. They had 3, 4, 5 services going on. I thought to myself that, this is a great, period right here, because if you're a member of a church, you can actually do a little online drive-by on Saturday or on Sunday to see, okay, what are they doing over there? Okay, what are they doing over there? All right.
Yeah.
What did you do today? Oh, I went to this church, and this church. And you know what? I think I might get out from my church and go to this church after the COVID. It's some serious conversations that people are having around consumership.
Yes.
Because I think one of the things that has come out of this pandemic is that businesses, corporations, entities, institutions, college, universities, what have you, they're really realizing that their students, their members, and what have you are customers. And we've never really thought about that, in the church, because that's kind of like, ooh, you don't want to call a church member a customer. But from the standpoint that if I enter the doors, the question is, what are you offering? I know you need my tithes and my offerings. Don't get me wrong. We can be upfront about that. But what are you offering? What mental health services are you offering? Do you have some type of elderly program where you're checking in and making sure that testing is going on, with the seniors, or if you're shutting down the daycare, whatever? I mean, there's serious questions that members are raising about their memberships in churches around the country right now. The same thing with regards to students as well, Jeanette, with respect to the institution. Do you just want me to jump on a plane and fly back to, to Florida or to Alabama or to Virginia in the midst of all of this going on? Or are you offering something that's innovative? So disruption creates innovation if you want it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Great points. Reverend Michelle, anything pique your interest in that?
I think two things that I'll highlight. One is the American, especially Westernized drive toward radical individualism. We're seeing how that is contributing to spikes, secondary, third, fourth spikes in COVID diagnoses and deaths, and figuring out like who are we going to be? Are we going to hold on to the myth that even individualism at that level is possible, let alone the reality of how folks can live alongside one another over time? Or are we going to start to take on more of a communal understanding, not just in how we get along, but also just what does it mean? What does it mean to be interdependent? Based on the realities, not to use Dr. Ezell's language, not to soften it in any way, right? But to figure out like what does it mean for us within the United States to take a turn where we understand our own mythology as communal rather than radically independent. And then the second thing is just, and this has come up in all sorts of ways, memes, social media, folks just talking about it, whatever, articles, but so many things that were automatically just kind of pushed off like, oh, we couldn't possibly do that. All of a sudden, it's possible, like remote work. Oh, you can't do that. We can't do this kind of work remotely, especially church, right? Oh, we can't do that remotely. Oh, interesting. We're able to do it, right? Like, oh, we can't have this particular, change in structure or policy or practice or blah, blah, blah.
Or meetings. Everybody meeting online. We're running out of meeting space, but nobody want to get on a Zoom. Everybody's on a Zoom now.
Right. So all these things that we just kind of, we or other folks, whatever, just kind of shut down automatically, like, oh, that's not possible. All of a sudden, it's not only possible, but required. I mean, like, so then I guess an offshoot of that would be going back to the mental health understanding of like, what does it mean to be in 6 back-to-back Zoom meetings? Some of the studies that are coming out right now are talking about, when we're in a meeting face-to-face, we see everybody else, but we don't see ourselves. In a Zoom meeting, we see ourselves. And regardless of what that means to us, there's a shift in the kind of mental capacity it takes to do this. And that's not even counting the incredible demand and burden that's placed on y'all, people of color, and specifically Black folks right now. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? And hey, what do you think about this? And even just sitting in a meeting, right, and folks like, silently expecting you to do a bunch of stuff, right? There's pressure and frustration and, all the different emotions that go along with that, in addition to the toll that it takes on a physical, emotional, psychological, even spiritual body.
I was laughing because I told somebody, I'm big about energy. I'm huge about energy. So the whole thing about sitting in front of a computer all day, every day is already like for me. And then I've been surprised by the amount of mental weight that it takes, like, and things that you would think would be just simple meetings, right? But the because now you're dealing with a bunch of people's other stuff, right? That they bring that they don't normally bring to the table, but now I'm comfortable. I'm in my home. I'm gonna bring all my other stuff, and now I'm dealing with you, the other part of you, and the third part of you, like all of that. And so I see that, and it's so true. One of the things that I think is important as we kind of wrap this up, and you kind of mentioned it, Michelle, in a sense, we talk about oneness. I know that as faith folks, we should be looking at oneness as we look, vertically, but also the sense of oneness as we look horizontally. And what can we do to practice oneness? And I know different faith traditions look at oneness differently. We actually did a show on one of my coaching shows, and I was talking to them about, in the Buddhist faith, they'll ask, someone asked a question like, can you look at a sheet of paper and see the cloud? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, if you can't look at the paper and see the cloud, then you don't understand that without the cloud, there's no rain. Without the rain, there's no tree. Without the tree, there's no paper. Therefore, what's more important to the paper, the paper mill or the cloud? And just understanding how we all are a part of one another. And I honestly, from a gut place, feel that a lot of what's happening now is nothing that I can put into clear, defined, tangible terms, but it is because we have been, like, in a sense, committing mutiny against ourselves. Like, we are one. And so when you fight against pieces of yourself, and it's gone on for so long, and what I think we are seeing also, Michelle, you talked about, well, Dr. Ezell, you talked about the color of things being in front of us and adding more dimension to it so that we can't kind of pretend it's like a one-dimensional thing. Reverend Michelle, you added to that and how we perceive what we see, right? But I also think that part of it is now we're also understanding what we see. That some people are now moving on in ways that we've never seen before, because like me, myself, there was a mother saying when George Floyd called for his mama, all mothers were summoned. There was something about that was oneness. It was an expression of oneness. And so how do we now move forward as faith leaders, as light bearers, to help perpetuate this sense of understanding of oneness? Because when you understand oneness, you're not going to be so quick to hurt what you understand hurting you, right? I know that is a lofty idea in many ways. But what can we do, in your opinion? Is there anything we can do to help facilitate this idea of oneness?
Dr. Ezell, do you mind if I jump in here? So in a lot of the work that I do with GCOR, one thing that the church teaches that often obstructs anti-racism work is the equality model. The equality model. So in a lot of churches, basically we'll say, okay, this is the amount of work that needs to get done. We got 10 people, so we'll divide it into 10 things, and then each of the people will take a thing and we'll go do that thing, and then we will complete the whole thing, right? But in anti-racism work, and this is just the way any oppression functions, right? You're going to have folks that are the perpetrators and protected by that system, and you're going to have the direct targets of that system. And that means that based on our positionality, in this sense, racial positionality, we're going to have, and this is tossed around a lot, but different work to do.
Yeah,
really different work to do to attain the same goal. I set all that up to say that often if we think that being one with one another means that we have to be doing the same thing.
right.
And in disrupting, dismantling racism or any oppression, but in this case, racism, we're going to be doing different things alongside one another. So I think if especially for those of us who are white, if we can retrain our thinking to think about doing work alongside one another as trying to get toward oneness and tap into that oneness, rather than doing the same thing, and especially not perpetrating racism by demanding that people of color do the same things that we're doing. I think that if we look at oneness as doing work toward the same goal in different ways alongside one another, rather than flattening it into the same and the equality model, I think we'll walk toward and into oneness more faithfully.
Yes, ma'am. Well deserved. Dr. Ezell.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with Reverend Letter with regards to the fact that we don't have to do the same thing. In fact, I don't want to do the same thing. You know, and, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. We don't need to do the same thing. I mean, now, if we're talking about, you know, the whole notion around United Front and organizing in organization, that's a little different, because inside of that subcomponent, there needs to be, you know, activists and organizers and community, you know, participants and what have you working together. But as it relates to your point, totally agree. We don't all need to do the same thing. One of the things I think about a lot is mindfulness, right? And Jeanette, you mentioned the Buddhist faith and what have you. And you know, I'm big on transcendental meditation, and the whole notion around self-study. Self-study is extremely important. I believe that as we work together as brothers and sisters, we all need to take a step back to understand thyself.
Yeah.
And the reality is that everybody's dealing with something. They're trying to either get over something, they're trying to move through something, or they're trying to understand it per se. And the whole notion around mindfulness is important, because it raises the point that diversity is something that is with us and it's not going anywhere. The whole notion that the United States of America will look the way that it currently looks in 50 years is unrealistic. Whenever you land in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, and you travel along Ipanema and you see all the beautiful shades of folk. Now, don't get me wrong, and I'm not just lofty dreaming to say that, you know, racism doesn't exist in Brazil, but it's the reality that we are changing. Generations are leaving us. A new generation is coming into being, and the growing pains that we're dealing with right now are the sick growing pains that we see, you know, on television, whether it's through media, whether it's being replicated through forms of oppression, forms of racism, forms of sexism, and what have you. All this stuff is just coming out. It's just it's being regurgitated up. And my hope is that the faithful minded, those folks who are willing to work together, will, you know, keep the course, or rather stay the course, and keep fighting the good fight. The second thing we need, Jeanette, in my opinion, is a form of multi-track diplomacy. And oftentimes when we think about diplomacy, we think about government to government engagement, government officials just engaging each other. But to resolve conflicts, especially in intractable conflicts, you mentioned that earlier, Reverend Letter, intractable conflicts on the ground in many hard-hit places, there needs to be a framework where we understand that we need to, when I say we, social leaders need to engage with government. We need to engage with business leaders. We need to engage with the religious community. We need to engage with activists. We need to engage with students. We need to engage, you know, so on and so forth. And if we have a multi-track mindset, you know, with respect to acknowledging that others exist and that they're doing good work too, and that we need to engage and connect with them, then I think that we'll be on the road to really getting some stuff done. And it is okay to echo your point. It is okay if everybody's doing different things. We just need a track, you know, to understand how to communicate and engage with one another. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing right now, is understanding how to dialogue and communicate with other in a way that we see other as human.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, sir. Well, you already know what's next. You all have dropped some heavy nuggets on us, and we also got some heavy. Yeah, that's what I said, Jay. A lot of wisdom in there. A lot of wisdom. Thanks for popping back in. Good to see you on the stream, Jay. The Reverend Dr. Patrick Claiborne. Howard Thurman suggests that the unity of the human race will begin when each person gets to the substance of themselves, to their literal essence, through deep introspection, which may necessitate prayer, meditation, therapy, and counseling. In doing so, when we get to the bottom of ourselves, we will find the other. You all already know that. Follow me in the Empowerment Drive. Self-excavation and looking inside first is paramount. The first thing I see the church doing is coming together across denominational lines. Because of that difference, there's no oneness. Once we come together in the unity of faith, we can begin to voice and then address other issues. That would be a beautiful thing. If tribalism is going to continue, we need a wider vision. A wider vision. Thank you for weighing in today. Thank you too for coming on and for sharing your thoughts. I know it might have been a little different than you thought, or maybe you didn't know what to expect. Maybe Amen didn't know what we were going to do. But I know this. Oh, Savalas weighs in. The first question a doctor asks, where does it hurt? Once that place is acknowledged, then that person can begin the journey of healing and rehabilitation. Absolutely. But we have to be willing to tell the doctor where it hurts. And one of the things that I've noticed in my own personal walk through this is that I didn't always say when it hurt. I didn't always say when it hurt. And I had to go back and ask myself, why didn't you? And I had a conversation with a high school mate, and I told her about a situation that happened in one of my classes where I was called the N-word by students, and basically the teacher participated. And I never said anything. Why didn't I say anything? I don't even know if my parents ever knew that. I know my classmates didn't know that. But I think that's another thing that's happening, is that we're starting to say where it hurts. We're starting to say, I think there was a time when we said, we had to suck it up, put the armor on. You just take it. It's going to come. You don't know how, when, or where, but it's coming. Put the armor on. You don't deflect, not realizing that even when you deflect stuff, you're still taking a hit, right? You're still taking a hit. And that hits over time do turn into things. And so I encourage you all to keep having the conversation. Now, listen, if you can't have conversations with allies, pull in friends that have it, that can talk to people. Because here's what I also don't think is helping. When people are coming with a good intention and a good heart to figure out, where is my space in this place, that we as people of color go, yeah, but I'm too tired to talk to you about it. And then don't at least dot connect you to somebody that can have the conversation, because what you're now doing is leaving to the devices of whoever shows up to pour in information that may or may not be edifying to the cause or edifying toward truth. And so self-excavation helps me heal me first in this, helps me process even what's going on first, helps me be and show up to things and organizations and churches and whatever else am I involved in, relationships, a healthier being. And then from there, then we can help each other. But let's help each other. Let's keep being bridges. Let's keep having the conversations. When you're in the space, you can do it from a healthy place, when you are able to do it. He says, Bishop says, yes, ma'am, but a lot of pressure builds up behind that. And then there's just a matter of time before the big boom. Absolutely. And that's what I hope it, by us having these conversations, I'm even going to chunk this down into bite-sized pieces, because somebody may not watch an hour and 20 minutes or something, but you might take a little bite-sized nuggets, right? That we will all do our part. Some people will be marching in the streets. Some people, this will be my work online. Some people will be in different spaces, reaching out in different ways to just keep bringing that third dimension to this, so that we don't collapse it down into something that's palatable, and then we go back to our normal lives as we have done in years past. And it was, remember 2020? Yeah, that was crazy. So thank you all. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Any last words you want to share, either one of you? I know, Dr. Ezell, you have your website Dr. is Darrell Ezell PhD.com, correct? That's where people
Right. Yeah, that's my website. You can connect with me. I would love to. Oh, wow, you didn't put the picture. Should have. I gotta watch you, Jeanette. You.
Darrell.
She went straight to the website. Shout out to her.
Who am I?
Jeanette.
Yeah,
you can connect with me on the website. Also, you can pick up my book, Beyond Cairo, U.S. Engagement with the Muslim World, palgrave.com or amazon.com. Two books that I just wish to throw out to your listeners, Jeanette, as a helpful read. Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. Profound text that wrestles with the question of Black people and their backs against the wall and how can they survive. And the second piece, or rather book, is The Cross and the Lynching Tree by Dr. James Cone, the Honorable Dr. James Cone. Those are two books right there that I think will offer some foundation and grounding for folks. And if you don't want to buy a book per se, you just want to go somewhere and listen to a song, Frankie Beverly and Mays, We Are One.
That's great. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ezell.
Thank you.
Reverend Michelle?
I don't know. I mean, the things that we've talked about today have been so powerful. I've really enjoyed being part of this conversation and hearing the two of you just speak such wisdom has been a blessing for me, really, truly. I don't have a website. I don't have any of that. They can
follow you where?
Say what?
I'm gonna tell you what though. If you Google her,
okay.
If you just Google her, she's heavy.
Yeah, she's heavy.
When I say she's heavy, this sister preached a word about hypothetical courage out of Exodus and led in singing. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Oh, you sing?
No. I'm not talking about like some nice CCM. I'm talking about we're down here, Lord, waiting on you. Like, going in and was doing it under the anointing. So yes.
I will say, well, thank you. Like I don't know what to say after that. I will say though, if you know, just speaking of your your deep wisdom of bridge building and pointing to folks. So, as a white person, my main responsibility is teaching other white folks about, how racism is showing up, how we're perpetrating racism, and how we can engage in anti-racism work. So, if you are in a position where you need to point or even just want to point some white folks at another white person who's doing this work.
Already.
So you can catch me on Facebook, certainly. Like, so if it's a social media thing or whatever, and you tag me in there, like, hey, Michelle, come over here, then I'll know what that is, right? Like, then I can take a look at what's going on and I can respond. So we can do it that way. Or if you've got something, more specific or what have you that's not happening on social media, you can reach me at eMichelleLetter. So it's my name with E in front of it for Emily, just in case anybody cares about that. It's eMichelleLetter@gmail.com.
Okay, let me
That's my personal email address.
Okay, eMichelleLetter@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And while I put that up for people to peep on, let me share two resources that I'm working through right now that I'm finding very interesting. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, which he has a whole thing like anti-racist baby, to speak to the young people, like let's start young, let's do the adult thing. And then Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, Why Is It So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism? Two great resources there as well. Thank you too. I appreciate you all. I see you all in the chat. I told you, Darrell, Jeanette will come with the pictures and the videos. Anyway, Pastor. I don't know what that is. You put the book links in there. Thank you so much for subscribing, Diana. Appreciate you, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, for putting that up. Reverend Michelle Praise Team auditions are tomorrow at 3. Come on through. One love from London. That's awesome. From the UK. There you go. Appreciate you popping in, and thank you all for being on. I don't know where this journey leads. None of us do, but I just know this, that as we move forward, there may be other topics and different things that I may, reach back for you on and just get your insights, whether it be in front of the camera or off. I think that you all are beautiful resources within your own right. And I want to thank you for everything that it took for the journey to get Darrell Ezell, sir, to get you to England and to PhD and back from Huntsville, Alabama. Reverend Letter, I don't know your whole walk, but when I saw you standing powerfully in that historic pulpit of Metropolitan AME Church as a white woman preaching the show enough gospel, I knew that the anointing of God is on you. So thank you all for what you do, what you bring, and what you will continue to do. And I pray that God continues to bless you and cover you and sustain you in this work, because it ain't easy. It ain't easy. And there's always some price to pay. We understand that. And so I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. And just blessings to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that's it for us today. Go back and catch the parts that you weren't able to catch. And I will see the tribe, Empowerment Tribe. I'll see you all on live for life coaching, 10 a.m. in the morning. Be blessed.
One time I tell them I'm California dreaming.